My name is Aaron Ettram. I'm also with Uptime Legal. I'm the Chief Business Development Officer here. Just to give you guys a basic history on me, I've been in the technology industry professionally for over 20 years now. I started very young on the help desk, and then I was a network administrator. I was a network engineer for 3 different Fortune 500 companies. I was a IT consultant for 7 years, and now I focus on the business development side. So it's a pleasure for me to serve as your speaker today. Over the last decade, I've worked with hundreds of law firms all over the world, but predominantly 99% of them are in North America. And I'm going to walk you through our agenda here. Number one, we're going to give you a basic introduction to PC Law. I know that most of the attendees here today are already familiar with it, so we're going to keep that very light. Number two, is PC Law Cloud different than traditional PC Law? Number 3, does it matter who I host PC Law with? And then number 4, going over hosting packages and options, what's best for my firm? And of course, lastly, we'll go over some Q&A. All right, so we're going to start with a quick poll just to see, do you own PC Law today? Yes, no, or I used it once upon a time and I'm considering my options. So I'm going to let Andrew run the poll here and we'll just get some feedback.
Yeah. So everyone, the poll is now opened. If you would, please, bring up the GoToWebinar screen, and you should see a poll window open. All right, we'll wait a few more seconds to make sure everyone has a chance to respond to the poll. Then we'll close it down and see what we've got. All right, and if you haven't finished submitted the poll yet, please do so right now on your screen. And that'll do it. So let's see. So our response, 100%, everyone in attendance is using PC Law. All right.
All right, good to know. Thank you, Andrew. All right, so most of you are familiar with it. So it's if you're not familiar with it, PC Law is basically a feature-rich case management system that helps you with pretty much everything: clients, contacts, calendars, time and billing, and it has integrated legal-centric accounting along with very robust reporting. Now, I can count on one hand the number of applications on the market that really have such a well-rounded feature set. And because of this, PC Law is still one of, if not the most widely used product amongst the US and Canadian market. Now, one of its major draws is it's fairly easy to set up and it's very turnkey. You don't have to do a lot of customization. You can install it, define a couple of parameters, and you're kind of off to the races. Now, PC Law is an installable client/server driven platform. That said, you should have a server and someone to help you manage the network that it's on. As an alternative to this, you can look into cloud options, which is ultimately why we are all here today. All right, so why have some move to web applications? Now, the picture on the right pretty much sums up the general mindset of most businesses and law firms today. And many law firms have mistakenly associated owning PC Law as going hand in hand with server ownership. Now, firms will do almost anything to avoid this list of cons here that come along with owning a server. And unfortunately, many have been misled and feel that they need to change their applications in order to achieve this. So we're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail later on. Looking at some of the pros here, as far as the cloud goes, everything looks so appealing. We don't have these giant upfront investments, right? Every 3 to 5 years, here comes the 10 to 20 or more $1,000 bill to refresh all your servers and all your backup systems and APCs, right? And licensing and so on and so forth. Everyone wants to be more mobile. They don't want the liability anchors that come along with owning a server. So it's little wonder that at least at a bare minimum, when law firms are faced with this, that they are going to at least consider their options before pursuing the same old cycle of server ownership over and over and over again. So that brings us to our next poll, which is, what is, quote unquote, the cloud? So here we're gonna have some options here. A black box of confusion. B, applications built on web technology. C, an over-brutalized marketing buzzword that is simply a metaphor for the internet as a whole, or D, storage of data and or applications that is provided by a third-party service? Andrew?
All right, the poll is now open. So if you out there could please fill out your answers. We'll see what we got in a few seconds. All right, and I think that should just about do it for us. We have 13% with applications built on web technology, and data storage / applications provided by a third party at 87%.
Perfect. So D is probably the most technically accurate. B is accurate as well for those of you who picked that. Now, when you want to think about this, web apps are a form of cloud computing. So it's like someone asking me to define what is transportation. And if I said riding a bicycle, that would technically be correct, right? It's a form of it, but there's a lot more. So D kind of fits the bill from the standard, the way that people are looking at it. You know, if I had to pick one of the four, I would pick C. And we're going to kind of get into a little bit why that is, but pretty much for the most part, that's true. It's been a word that's been very loosely used so that people can sell products. So what is, quote unquote, the cloud? Now, understanding what the cloud is can really be answered by evaluating its purpose. What it is that law firms are looking to accomplish when evaluating their cloud options is the key. And we can give a number of answers to this, but I'm going to break it down into just two fundamentals that we have outlined here. We're going to start with mobility. Now, mobility is not really a luxury item anymore, but it's an expectation. The ability to look up important case information on the go, to bill hours on the spot without things falling between the cracks, it's important. Also, the need to centralize information. You're getting a lot of law firms where they have a handful of different offices. That's becoming more and more popular. Maybe the number of people that are looking to work from home is increasing. This gives you the ability to seek and retain talent without having these geographical limitations and walls stopping you. Next, we're looking at liability, right? So this means buying in-house servers and maintaining them. That big giant check that you cut for your new infrastructure, that's just a start. When you buy a server, it's not just expensive up front, but what's more money is it's a never-ending money pit because you need to make sure the data is secure, both physically and from a cyber standpoint. You need to make sure the data is backed up, both on-site and off-site. You need to make sure that the server's in good working health and that it's not on the verge of a crash, which could lead to even more days of downtime. You need to make sure that viruses and malware don't infect your network, which can lead to exposure of critical information and privileged information and more downtime. You need to worry about, even if you do all these things right, you need to worry about the unforeseen things, thefts, water damage, fires, natural disasters. The list goes on and on. All told, the headaches of owning servers and the liability anchor that comes with it is a burden that people just want to get away from. So what is the cloud? It is any service that ultimately helps you to achieve these goals. You have to ignore the word cloud and you have to focus on what am I trying to accomplish. So the dark side of the cloud. Now, some feel that they need to change applications to be on the cloud. They may also feel that web applications are the only way to truly be in the cloud, or someone led them to believe that. So they start evaluating new options. So this is the first mistake. Now, I've seen law firms turn their back on PCLaw or other robust applications like it for a watered down web application and regret it almost instantly. Oftentimes, you'll see these firms transition back within a matter of months. Now, when you look at PCLaw and other products like it that have been around for 2 to 3 decades, the features and the products that they've been incorporating into these programs for years can't be easily emulated in a web application that's been around for no time at all. So software companies, they love to use banners and keywords like case management, document management, billing, reporting, calendaring, maybe even accounting. looks all good on the banner, right? It's like, hey, this could replace PCLaw. So people think that they can move with no problems. Well, what they realize is that the words that they're using to associate case management and their contact management, calendaring, DMS, billing, accounting, reporting, and so on, these words get thrown around with very extreme liberty, borderlining on outright deception sometimes. And these firms that gain better mobility by switching, but they end up losing their robust features, it can cost you dearly. Billable hours get missed, appointments, data that they used to obtain with a press of a button now takes hours to compile. And when it's all said and done, the money that they thought they were going to save has not only evaporated, but now they're going backwards. They're losing money. So for these reasons, PCLaw is still a global leader within the case management arena for law firms and legal departments. Point in case, better mobility is great, but not at the expense of adequate case management features. What you gain by means of better mobility can quickly evaporate if the foundational features of your new software is lacking. So fortunately, you can have your cake and eat it too. So we're going to move on to PCLaw in the cloud versus the traditional on-premise approach. So what's the better option? So is there a difference in PCLaw versus PCLaw on-premise? So this is a very popular question that we get a lot, and we get it for good reason. And I'm going to start with an example of QuickBooks. Now, QuickBooks has a lot of brand name recognition. So for this reason, when they made an online version of the product, they wanted to maintain this brand name recognition. So what did they call it? QuickBooks Online. Sounds great, right? Same good old QuickBooks, just online. Well, as people found out, this was not the same product, just in a web browser format, but it was a complete remake and lacked a lot of robust features that were previously available within the desktop and installable version of QuickBooks. Now, while this worked for basic businesses that didn't have robust needs, for many, this online version of QuickBooks was simply not a viable option. Also note, this is software that was made by the exact same company. It's owned by Intuit on both sides of the coin. And QuickBooks Online has now been out for several years, and they've still not caught up to the traditional version. So is it little wonder that applications like PCLaw cannot be so easily duplicated, and mind you, by completely different companies apart from the owners of the original brand name? That said, instead of slapping together a watered-down web product and calling it PCLaw Online, LexisNexis took a different approach to cloud computing as it pertains to PCLaw. So to answer the question, PCLaw is the exact same application on-premise or in a cloud format. And this can be delivered by means of virtual technology. Maybe it's remote desktop, maybe it's more of a Centric approach. Now, some scoff at this answer to cloud hosting, and they'll argue, well, that's not what real cloud hosting is. But recall, this is simply an uneducated opinion of those who have a biased objective. Cloud computing, again, is anything that helps you to achieve your fundamental goals of better mobility and decreased liability. To give you a quick example of how this works via remote desktop, we have a visual example here. So on the left is how your local computer would work in this world. It's just basically a desktop with a browser and a little icon on it. After launching the remote icon, it's going to open up a virtual desktop. Now, if you're using the right kind of cloud technology and not using the Citrix approach, you're going to have more options: PC, Macs, iPads, tablets, Android devices. You're going to have a whole lot of more hardware agnostic options. Now, at this point, when you open this up, you're just watching mouse movements and keystrokes of what's really transpiring somewhere else. So your local computer is really nothing more than a dummy terminal at this point. There's nothing on it. Now, if you're thinking, I've used remote access in the past, maybe remote desktop, maybe go to my PC anywhere, log me in. Maybe you've had some lag where you're typing and taking a few seconds for the letters to catch up to the keyboard and you want to throw the computer out the window. Now, this is something that you should not expect. So this is not acceptable, and with the right cloud provider, you will not have this experience. We'll get into that a little bit later. But it should be a smooth experience where you forget that you're even sitting down or working in a cloud environment. So let's talk about some other benefits to this approach. Now, first we're going to talk about database conversions. Now, when you switch applications, even if it's a branded web version of the same product, you're dealing with a completely different database format. So for this reason, moving products can be very expensive or very time consuming for your staff to try to manually re-enter all of the data. Now, this is because the tables are going to be different. The logic and the terminology can be different. The location of information is different, and so on. So even after this is all said and done, your custom reports, if you lean on a lot of those, are almost surely going to need to be recreated from scratch. Consultants who do this kind of work will often end up spending hours on moving everything over. And the bill can be in the thousands, and I've seen the tens of thousands. After it's all said and done, it's still not going to be perfect, and you might spend kind of weeks on end just figuring out where are things at, or where should new data go, or figuring out new methods to doing business in general. So when you move PCLaw to the cloud, it is a simple matter of taking your existing PCLaw database in its exact same format and just plugging it into a new database server. There's no expensive conversion cost. It's the equivalent of retiring your old server and putting PCLaw onto a new one. So the next issue, which is probably the biggest, and that's adoption of new software. Now, many firms struggle with this because when you're taking on a new system from scratch, it's very easy to be entrenched with the practice of law, especially for some of the senior attorneys. And when you add this burden on top of it, here, learn this new process and procedure, a lot of times it's too much to handle. And in a law firm, even if one or two key people are not on board, it can ruin the whole thing. Also, new software can be a little bit of a black box. You know, you might have some hopes and dreams going into it, but all the things that might have seemed appealing at first, once you start actually using it in a production environment, this is where you quickly realize that there's some serious shortcomings, some of which may not be overlookable. And lastly, depending on how long you've used the product, you may have been fine-tuning it for years, kind of getting it just right. Now, make no mistake, that perfect cocktail that you've been working on over the years, you could throw that out because you're going to be starting from scratch with a new product. Now, is all this fear tactics so that you never switch software until your firm dissolves? No. But you do need to make these decisions with open eyes, and you need to understand what you're getting yourself into. As I mentioned earlier, I've seen firsthand law firms move away from products like PCLaw and end up doing a complete 360 when it's all said and done. And this can end up costing the firm months of time, months of frustration. Thousands of dollars are lost in terms of buying new software, converting it, then paying to convert it back. And that cost often will pale in comparison to just general loss of productivity and things slipping between the cracks or clients getting angry and losing key clients. For these reasons, I've heard from several experienced legal software consultants that, and I quote, switching legal software programs should always be plan Z, end quote. More often than not, they find that the software is either not being utilized correctly, or as we talked about earlier, the law firm feels that they must switch applications in order to be in the cloud. So since we know we have 100% of PCLaw users here today, another multiple choice. Are you in the cloud with PCLaw now? Yes, no, I would like to be, but I'm not quite sure how it works. Or D, I'm using a different case management software in the cloud. Andrew?
All right, so the poll is open right now. Options are yes, no, I would like to, or I'm using a different case management software in the cloud. You can fill out your answers now, and then we'll close this shortly. Just waiting for a few more responses. All right, we'll close this in out now. All right, the question is, are you in the cloud with PCLaw now? Yes, 7%, no, 47%, 40% I would like to, and 7% I'm using a different case management software in the cloud.
All right, thanks, Andrew. All right, does it matter who I host with? All clouds are not created equal. So just to take it back a step, we're going to look at kind of the three classifications of players in the cloud space. So the first group of people, you're going to have your local IT consultants, kind of the devil you know approach, the Me Too cloud service model. You have your cloud generalists, which are really people they're focused on cloud hosting, but it's more broad. It's more focused on the technology, not the industry. So it's kind of for everyone and anyone. And then you have the cloud specialists. These are people that are focused on a very specific industry, or they're focused on just a handful of applications across a few industries. So these are kind of the players that you're looking at, and we're going to look at some of the pros and cons to dealing with these players. So let's start with the IT consultants. Now, IT consultants these days, they're cloud aware, and to preserve business, most of them have labeled some sort of cloud option. Now, to this day, most of them will still try to get you to stay on premise and maybe create some fear and uncertainty around cloud solutions. In the event that their client is really demanding a cloud option, you may hear them use a word called hybrid cloud. So for example, how this would work, if you have PCLaw, Office, Adobe, email, and maybe a file server could go something like this. So maybe they start you on Office 365, which is just hosted Exchange email, and maybe couple that with a OneDrive or a Dropbox, giving you some basic file storage. So the question is, where does this leave PCLaw? See, in this case, you would still need some sort of server, which leaves you with the same problem of buying and maintaining and all the other liabilities and downsides of owning a server. Other IT firms have taken it a step further and provided more of a complete solution. This is often delivered through a third-party hosting service such as AWS, Amazon Web Services, for example. They'll rent the infrastructure in your behalf, and then they'll charge you a monthly fee to manage it. Now, typically, this ends up being more expensive than the cost of owning a server when it's all said and done. And there's some other issues, too, that you need to look out for with people that are hosting with AWS-type services, which we'll get into in a little bit. Now, a bigger issue can really be legal-centric application expertise. Now, most IT firms are focused on what I like to call the vanilla aspects of IT, meaning the core aspects of the infrastructure. So when you start getting into legal applications such as PCLaw, you may have encountered some shoulder shrugging, right? Almost every law firm that I've talked to has experienced a finger-pointing war between their IT consultants and between their software vendors. Now, to make matters worse, once you're on a cloud platform, the support that the software vendor can give you is going to become very limited. And the reason for this is all these different cloud methodologies, they can differ so drastically that it's impossible for companies like LexisNexis to support everyone's approach and harebrained ideas as to how to do cloud hosting. So when problems arise, this can lead to some real frustration. The next thing to consider is most IT firms are fairly small organizations. It's one thing to have these companies support your servers with on-site equipment. Your worst case scenario is the company goes belly up and you have to search for and hire a new provider, right? Now, imagine if you handed them everything and then they close their doors. Where does that leave you? Now, I'm not saying you have to host with a massive multi-billion-dollar establishment that has its own challenges, right? But you do need to make sure that you're in a boat with a lot of your peers and that there's clear signs of business stability and growth. So don't be afraid to ask them, how long have they been doing cloud hosting specifically? How many other law firms do they have as clients in the cloud? What has been their year-over-year growth patterns? And lastly, look for validation. Don't just take their word for it. Look for things like the Inc. 5000 award. Ask for a list of references to obtain proof that they have other happy clients in the legal realm that have done this. That said, for many people, it's still hard to move away from your IT consultant. And it's understandable because you've built a relationship, you've built trust over the years. It's nice to have someone who can kind of add a face-to-face touch to their service. It does have some appeal, even though it might not be totally necessary. And as a good solution to this, I've seen a lot of IT firms partner with national software hosting specialists to provide a better, more all-inclusive solution to their clients, all the while staying in their lane. This allows their clients to go 100% cloud-based, to 100% get rid of all their servers, and we'll talk about some of these options a little later on. Now let's talk about the larger scale cloud generalist providers, right? Now there are companies these are companies that are really geared towards cloud. It's not a footnote. It's not a side hustle. It's what they do. The pros is a serious cloud player typically owns their own infrastructure. They're not renting from AWS, Microsoft Azure, or some other big infrastructure company. Now, some people wonder, why is this a good thing? Because if you're ever dealing with anyone that resells AWS, they're going to promote that as a good thing, when in reality it's not. So first and foremost, this shows their level of commitment and investment in being a serious cloud service provider. Very few companies are willing to invest 7 figures into a cloud infrastructure. This also gives you a little bit of a clue as to how many clients they have. Anyone can rent a cloud and buy a little AWS slice and then charge somebody a management fee on top of that, right? Next, it's going to indicate their level of control and their ability to directly impact their client experience. Now, when we started doing cloud hosting at Uptime, it was in 2007, and we started out renting from Rackspace. And at the time, we didn't have close to the amount of money to build our own cloud platform. And I'll tell you, being a glorified middleman, it comes with a lot of challenges. Now, some of these issues were completely out of our control. Our clients would call and bark at us, and then we'd pick up the phone and bark at somebody else. You want your cloud vendor to be 100% invested in the cloud. You want them to be in control, and you want them to be accountable without excuses. If they're not willing to invest in themselves, then you certainly don't want to invest your entire law firm into them. Cloud companies that own their own infrastructure can also give you better rates typically, without cutting corners. It's very hard to be a middleman and to be competitive. It can be done, but in that case, you have to wonder kind of where are the shortcuts being taken, because I can almost guarantee you that somewhere, whether it's in the quality of their support staff, what are the limitations of the service level agreement, are they selling me an underpowered environment, they're doing something to bring that cost down that's going to be detrimental to you. Another downside of the cloud generalist is they just simply lack industry expertise and thus application specific expertise. So when you're dealing with a generalist, it is the traditional anything for a buck mentality. Some of them are smart enough to do some targeted marketing and try to appear industry specific. But if you really peel back those layers of the onion, you'll find that they're really there to accommodate everyone. Now, one way to catch this is when you do a cloud, like a Google search for cloud hosting for law firms, these providers typically have what's called a landing page. And that will bring you to a page that makes it look like, oh, wow, these guys really do legal. But take out the extension at the end and go to their home page. And if you don't, when you're looking at someone's home page, if you don't get a feel on their home page that they're legal centric, then I can assure you that they're not. See, at a marketing level, these generalists, they'll make a banner for legal, but they're also making banners for accounting. They're making banners for healthcare and so on. The only thing that matters is legal-centric operations. Legal-centric marketing and sales is completely worthless to you. So imagine that you're calling into a help desk and the person picking up the phone, they'll get an occasional law firm, but they're talking to dental offices. They're talking to CPA firms. They're talking to manufacturing firms. They're talking to Joe's hot dog stand, right? Your actual support experience is going to be nothing close to what was marketed and sold to you. Next, you need to prepare for an inaccurate quote. Now, because of their lack of expertise, they may not know exactly how to build the environment based on the applications you have. So do you think the sales rep is erring on the side of caution and building in extra resources and costs on the front end? Or do you think they're going to make some uneducated assumptions and go with a price that seems appealing? Then after you sign up, you can either deal with the poor performance or you can pay the surprise upcharges. So don't be fooled. If it's priced lower than other vendors, trust me, there's a reason for it. They're not providing the same service with lower profit margins out of the kindness of their hearts. Something's wrong. Lastly, because of the lack of expertise, your odds of problems just simply increase. And accountability for the problems will again be a finger-pointing game between the cloud provider and the software company, leaving you trapped in the middle, angry and confused. In short, yes, your legal software matters. Make sure that you're just not an irrelevant cog in a wheelhouse of a generalist cloud provider. Last method, legal-centric cloud hosting specialist. This is also a cloud-driven company. This is what they do, but they have made an exclusive focus on either the legal community as a whole, or they focused on a very small handful of applications within the legal realm. Now, these type of companies are very hard to find, and there's not many of them. Most cloud providers don't want to limit their potential client pool by focusing to this extent. And to be a legal-centric cloud provider, it does require a lot of discipline. You're going to lose a lot of third-party business that you would have otherwise obtained if you did not define your parameters so tightly. But your experience will be vastly different with these type of providers than with anyone else. So think of it this way. It's your anniversary and you want to take your spouse out for a nice steak dinner. Let's pretend you're both steak fans. So where do you go? Applebee's? Not if you want to sleep on the couch. Well, so what do? You pick out a nice upper echelon restaurant that specializes in steaks, right? So don't bring your law firm to the Applebee's of cloud providers. Now let's talk about the specific benefits. A legal-driven cloud provider should be able to quote you quickly and accurately. So for example, if you say, hey, we have 15 users, we have PCLaw, we have Microsoft Office, we have Adobe DC, we have Time Matters, maybe you have Quickbooks for a set of side books. You should have a quote in hand within the hour, and it should be accurate. And this is because this is not their first rodeo. Their ability to properly prepare, build, and then migrate you is going to be a lot smoother. They understand the applications you have. They understand its nuances. They understand how to install it, how to configure it, how to establish its links and plugins with other applications, and then test or patch known issues before you go live. They also have a lot of experience with the support staff of your legal software. So first of all, problems are going to be more rare, but if they do occur, they work together to fix the problem versus working to assess whose fault it is. If there are legal application bugs or problems in a new version of the software, chances are they've already dealt with it many times over. So you're not going into an uncharted adventure every single time you go to upgrade your software, crossing your fingers, hoping this doesn't blow up in your face. Also, their support staff is just acclimated to the legal industry. So when you call in, they've dealt with your software many times. They understand the mentality. Everything's an emergency when something goes wrong that you'll often see in a law firm. And because of their vast experience, I can promise you that they will solve problems much faster than your generalist IT consultant and cloud service provider. Lastly, if they specialize in legal, you're going to be in a boat with several of your peers. Now, law firms have a strong tendency to want to flock together and look to implement a solution that has worked for hundreds of law firms that have come before them. So don't be a lab rat. Nothing beats a tried and true solution. Next poll is a would you rather. No right or wrong answer to this. A, have a solution that just hosts PCLaw, or B, have more of an all-encompassing solution that can host your PCLaw, but also your documents, your email, your third-party applications outside of PCLaw, Office, and includes IT support for the cloud and locally. So those are your options. Andrew, go ahead.
All right, the poll is now open. Please select whichever answer appeals to you. And after everyone's had a chance to submit their response, we will close this poll down. All right, we'll wait a few more seconds. All right. And about 40% are looking for a solution for just PCLaw, and about 60% solution that hosts the entire environment.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. All right, so let's get into hosting packages and options. So again, that was not a right or wrong answer. There is very good reason why someone would look for one solution or the other. Here at Uptime, we do both, and based on our experience, we've tried to accommodate both walks of life. So some people are looking to kind of just host PCLaw. So if we're looking at this right column here, right, these are people that would fall into that column. Now, typically, these firms, they have an IT consultant that they like working with. Many times they've started their journey to the cloud. Maybe they've already migrated to Office 365 with email. Maybe they've already went to like a Dropbox or a OneDrive or a Centric share file for storage. And then maybe they've done a couple of other things as well. So all they have left is like, man, we got PCLaw sitting on the server, and if we could just offload PCLaw, then we'd be done with servers, right? 100%. So this is where they're looking to just fill this last void, and where an IT consulting firm that's looking to partner with a legal-centric cloud provider can kind of work together to fill that last void. Now, in this scenario, it would kind of look like this. You have the responsibilities of the cloud provider here on the left, and you have the responsibilities of the IT firm still on the right. So this is kind of a co-managed environment where you have these different roles. Now, one other thing that I'll point out on the left, some people, because we're talking about PCLaw, they'll see this SQL server down here. For those of you who are a little bit more aware from a technology standpoint, is most of you that are here today are probably on PCLaw 14 or older, and you don't have a need for a SQL service today. Most PCLaw users are running on something called a C-tree database backbone. And this is basically a flat file database that can sit on top of your file server. So it's not a lot of extra money. Now, when you do go to upgrade your PCLaw to 16 or newer, you will need a dedicated SQL server for PCLaw. I'm not going to jump into too much detail about this, but basically SQL, it's a much more robust and less fallible database format. But it does require a decent amount of resources, some licensing, and you can no longer share server roles. So if you've gotten away with having one server, you're going to have at least two. That said, make sure that when you're looking at cloud options, that the cloud company you're talking to is aware of this future need and the costs surrounding it, so that if you move to the cloud and you have kind of that C-tree database format today, you don't want them to have to upgrade you and say, oh, looks like we're going to need to add on a SQL server, and then here comes your surprise cost. So this should already be incorporated into the plan. Now, coming back to the options, your other options are kind of the all-inclusive to get everything you need with one vendor. And this is for those who maybe they're not fond of their IT consultants, or maybe just they feel they've outgrown them, or the solutions that are being offered to them are just not adequate, and it's kind of out of scope for their existing provider. Maybe they're not very far into their cloud journey and they've only migrated their email to Office 365, or maybe they have other applications. It's like, hey, we got CaseMap, we got Time Matters, we got PCLaw, we got other things we need to host that are sitting on the server. So if you want to really 100% eliminate all your servers and you're looking to consolidate that accountability for your cloud experience, then maybe the all-inclusive route would be best for you. So all-inclusive hosting has been a big success for a lot of law firms. Now, keep in mind that if you chop things up too much, you might end up in what we like to call cloud hell. So for example, here's what it looks like. Let's say that you move to Office 365 for email. Like, hey, this is great, right? Then you move to Dropbox and you put all your documents up there. And then maybe you move to a web application of some sort for case management, or you just go and host PCLaw with a third-party vendor. Then for local IT care, you still have your IT consultants, because despite the fact that you don't have a server, you still have computers, you still have a network, you still have wireless, you still have printers, you still have scanners, you still have mobile devices. You have things you need help with. So here's the problem. At this point, you have about 3 to 4 different points of support depending on what your issue is. So for firms that just host PCLaw with us, I can tell you that quite often we'll get a call that says, hey, I can't email what's going on here. And we have to politely remind those people like, hey, we don't host your email. So at this point, this is where the end user gets really frustrated and they're fumbling around like, well, who am I supposed to call then? What's going on here? So another thing to remember is there's a lot of room for error between the cloud service, the internet as a whole, and your local network, and then all the way down to the endpoint or the computer. And a lot of times users think they know where the problem is, but they're often wrong. They might think it's in the cloud, but it's really local, or it's local, but it's in the cloud, and they end up calling the wrong vendor, thinking that they're calling the right one, and then they end up getting put kind of through the support ringer and passed along to different resources, and it's a very convoluted, difficult process to follow. So the all-inclusive approach eliminates this issue, as the cloud company is now 100% accountable for the cloud platform all the way down to the local computer and everything in between. Users can call one number and get the help they need every single time without fail. Another benefit along with consolidation is just nobody wants to spend 5 to 10 minutes every day logging on to 2 or 4 different cloud portals. One log on, one desktop, Everything you need right inside of one platform simply yields a much better experience for you and your staff. The next thing to consider is security requirements are getting pretty strict when it comes to cloud. So maybe you're under HIPAA or FINRA standards, or maybe you have an insurance company as a client, and here comes the big list of things they want you to check. Now, if you got this segregated cloud approach, try doing this process with all these different cloud providers. Now you have 3 different cloud providers to validate all these things against. Whereas if you're in an all-inclusive model, you can kind of work with one vendor to answer all these questions and implement any compliance that you need to. That's a huge benefit. All right, some red flags, things to look out for. The price points can really vary on these services that we're talking about big time. If one cloud company has a lower price versus another, I can assure you that there is a reason for it. So the first thing you need to understand is what's called the SLA, or the service level agreement. Now, a lot of vendors love to use the word unlimited support, but unlimited support of what? If you read the terms carefully, you might find some serious gotchas. So here's some examples. Make sure that the scope of support is not just limited to the cloud. So this, of course, would pertain to the all-inclusive route here. So some vendors will either not help you at all, or they'll charge you a fee, or even by the hour. And things that might surprise you, what they would consider a change. If you're adding and removing a user, oh, you bought a new printer, oh, that's a fee. Oh, you got a new iPad, that's a fee. They can really nickel and dime you up. So you have to ask yourself, what happens? Ask, if I add new users, if I let go of somebody, if I get a new computer, new device, new printer, what does that cost? What if you need to upgrade PCLaw to a new version? What's the fee for that? What about just Microsoft Office or Adobe? Is there going to be more fees for that? What if you get a new version of PCLaw and it requires an entirely new virtual infrastructure and you need new virtual servers and new virtual workstations? Is this included, or are you going to be getting hit with a massive fee? See, many cloud vendors, their goal is to price their products to sell. Once you're in, they'll beat you up behind the curtain with the nickel and dime effect. So another factor that gets ignored a lot is who is going to pick up your phone calls absolutely matters. Now, a lot of cloud companies are seriously cheaping out in this regard. Everything from outsourced help desks that's overseas to just hiring very low-level people to answer the phones, that's becoming very popular. So oftentimes, when you call in and you need help, they'll walk you through some very basic, rudimentary troubleshooting. If that doesn't work, you get escalated. Now you're sitting around waiting 1 to 2 business days to talk to an engineer who can start working on fixing the actual problem. Now, the kicker is the cloud company will have contractually met their SLA because they simply picked up the phone and documented the ticket. So your goal needs to be, number one, I want as few problems as possible out of the gate, but when problems happen, I want resolution, right? So if you go with a cut rate cloud vendor, plan on paying for it by means of downtime, problems, and frustration, right? You don't want tickets created, you want problems fixed. Lastly, salespeople are always going to tell you that they're great. You need validation and you need proof. So look for a couple of key things. First, try to get a general sense of their reputation within the legal community by way of partnerships, awards, and so on. Next, look them up online, Google or wherever else you can get reviews. We live in a society where people love to share their experience. So take advantage of that and try to gather that feedback. And lastly, whose opinion is worth more than that of other law firms using the service? So ask for references. And if they give you some lame excuse as to why they can't give you references, or they can only give you a couple of examples, consider that a red flag. What does it all cost? I'm sure that's a big question looming on everyone's mind, so I won't leave you with that. Now, depending on hosting PCLaw, if you're going to do more of an express, just host PCLaw or an all-inclusive, it literally ranges anywhere from $75 a user all the way up to around $199 a user. So all depending on what you're looking for in the options. So we're going to kind of look at just an all-inclusive average cost of $174 a month, let's say on the higher end. And this is where some people look at this and they say, man, if I just went and bought this web app, I'm only going to pay $69 a user a month. So I'm losing so much money here. That's $100 more a user, right? Well, not quite. See, most of these applications, they don't include accounting. or they'll integrate with QuickBooks or something like that. So you might have to go acquire that for $30 a user. Office 365 is definitely not built in, so you're going to pay anywhere from $10 to $20 a user a month to get hosted email and Microsoft Office. You're going to have to look at some kind of storage solution, because even though some of these apps say that they host documents, you're going to find that's pretty limited, and that's why they all integrate with Box and Dropbox. A good version of this is $20 to $30 a month. And then you have your IT consultants. You still have your local computers. So you're going to pay anywhere from $30 to $50 a month for managed antivirus and help with your computers, printers, scanners, wireless, right? So you add it all up. If you're looking at it right, you're going to pay right around the same. So when it's all said and done, this stuff costs the same. There's no magical formula to save a bunch of money. So that brings me back to the main focal point. Your time is your most valuable asset. That said, make sure that you're choosing the software that best suits the needs of your firm. Don't make poor decisions based on hopes of low prices, cloud methods, or promises from someone that's trying to sell you. Obtain the facts, weigh all the pros and cons, and make an educated decision. So that's going to conclude my aspect of the webinar. Now for some further reading materials, feel free to go out to uptimelegal.com/library. I put a couple of examples of things that you might want to download or look at. For example, we have the web app versus private cloud cost comparison chart. We have the 25 things to ask your private cloud provider, some things to kind of jog your memory and say, oh yeah, those are good points, we should ask that. So there's some good materials out there. Again, that's on our library, uptimelegal.com/library. Again, my name is Aaron Ettram. You can also email me directly at aaron.ettram@uptimelegal.com. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. And then that brings us to our last poll. If you'd like us to proactively reach out to you, we'd love to contact you. So if you'd like us to contact you after this webinar, probably won't be today, but at some point this week, just go ahead and say yes, and Andrew's going to run that poll here for us.
Everyone, the poll is now open. If you would please fill out the responses, and once we get that taken care of, we'll go right in to some Q&A.